like, what is somebody at that age going to want to like learn about? It's like, well, like, what branch maybe do I want to join? Or like, oh, I've been in for 3 years. Do I want to like re-enlist? Do I want to get out? Like, what opportunities are for me like outside of the military? And like, that's what we're like trying to aim for. I wonder if they knew and they're like, we can't give them this much joy this early on, so we're gonna have to string them along.
What's going on, recruit? Then he just put his finger right in my eye, and I'm like, I will rather let the mosquito eat me next time.
What does the future hold for you, and are you happy?
I'm going to start with the second one.
Welcome to the In the Field podcast, where we speak to veterans, service members, and those in the transition process to learn about their stories. Dmitry, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for coming in. I know New York winter's probably not the easiest to get out of the house, but really happy that you were able to make it. We've been in contact now for a little bit, but first time actually meeting up in person, which is a great excuse of this podcast, is there's like people I've met through networking or through friends of friends. And it's a good excuse to be like, let's meet up in person. Let's catch up. Let's actually chat one-on-one rather than on Zoom or on a phone call.
Yeah, no, absolutely. First of all, the winter this is like summer, growing up in Ukraine, this is not a big deal for me. But yeah, I love winter usually with a lot of snow. So no, and super, very happy to meet in person. And it's always, like you said, right? It's always better to have one conversation than 100 emails or text messages. But
exactly. Yeah. Well, the question I ask all my guests is, when was the last time you had an MRE?
As I was saying before, when I have not touched or looked at MRE, so probably 20 plus years. That makes me pretty old, I think, in terms of when I joined and when I got out. So I don't even know if my stomach can handle this. I'm going to have to,
get some Pepto. We should be bringing some Pepto-Bismol or some stuff as courtesies to our guests. And we definitely won't backwards date you up here on off that 20 years. No, I kid. A few MREs here on the table and on the ground. Guest goes first. Which one would you like to try? And feel free, you can move the microphone.
Yeah, no, I was looking for some of the tried and true, but I don't really see many. But I think my eye landed on this one that I cannot imagine could be that good. But I will try beef goulash. Being from Ukraine and being, close to the food that I was growing up, let's see how MREs.
It'll taste just like your mom's cooking back in the day, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's what I'm going to go for.
Perfect. I'm going to go for chicken chunks white cooked. We've gotten this box for. I don't remember seeing this one in there, so I don't know if they're just swapping out MREs within the box. But all right, we'll commit to the MREs. And we'll start to crack them open. But as we do that, I'd love to hear your story growing up. Like, not even joining the military, but before that. Like, what were some of the influences in your life? How was it being a kid and starting to get to the point where you started to think about joining the military? Yeah,
so I mean, first, I was born in a different country, right? So I was born in Ukraine. I came to the States around 94. Mm-hmm. I was 16 and a half. So I came here to, immigrate with my family. My mom's sister was already here. So we arrived into New York and I went straight to high school.
Wow.
I arrived in June 7th, 1994. And in 2 months, I went to high school and I went straight into like 12th grade. And no English, no concept what the culture is like. And I went to high school in the Bronx where...
Oh my God.
The first time...
Notoriously very nice and very welcoming. And
yeah, just like you said, right? I came to high school and I'm like, is this jail or is this high school? Why are there cops at the front entrance? Mm-hmm. Why is there metal detectors and this beautiful gates and all the things? But I made it. I survived. I did 2 years in high school.
It really does sound like it's a jail. Listen, it was 2 years. It was a tough time. Got inked up well there. What was your time like in Ukraine? Like how much? I mean, you were 16, so I can imagine you have a lot of memories growing up there.
Yeah, no, I mean it was great. I mean, I was obviously growing up through like communism and different life, and it was a lot different than it is right now. But memories wise, it's, now you're looking back, you're like, wow, this is what we survived, right? Really survived. But back then, because you didn't know anything different, things were good, right?
Yeah.
Things like when you have nothing compared to, it's all good.
My fiance is from Cuba, and so she grew up in I don't know how you call it, the reminiscence of Soviet Union or maybe the impact of, right? And there was things that she really liked, and then some stories where it was like, man, that was actually harder than my time in the military. What was your, I guess, experience? I mean, especially going to the Bronx. So when I moved from Sweden, I was 5 years old, so I have memories, but not maybe as critical as growing up to 16. But were there things that you kind of missed from Ukraine, and were there things where you're like, oh, thank God we actually have this now?
Yeah, I mean, at first it was obviously like being in my teens, like the close friends and school friends and your neighborhood friends. But then at the same time, where I moved in, there was a pretty good community, like a Russian Jewish community where I was growing up in the Bronx. So it was not as completely unfamiliar. Right. But obviously, my close friends was the first thing that was missing in terms of like what I had, because I had nothing else to comparison. Everything was like, everything was all brand new and experiencing everything else. And, drinking unlimited, Pepsi Cola and Coca-Cola. Yeah. It was like, oh my God, this is really happening, right? The supermarkets, they were extremely full, and there was, nothing was hidden behind the person who was selling the stuff. Yeah. It's like, it is really like the abundance, but yeah.
Was there any misconceptions about America that proved wrong? I ask because I've heard some from my fiance, so I'm curious if there was any in Ukraine about like, oh, if you go to America, like da da da.
Yeah, of course, it's like growing up and listening to the propaganda and TV is like everybody in America in New York City live in a cardboard box, right? Yeah. Everybody's homeless, and I'm like okay, but then you arrive and you see this pretty abundance of goods and wealth and everything. But then at the same time, I'm still growing up in the Bronx, right? So the first time you leave the Bronx and you go to Manhattan, or if you go to a different borough where it's like, oh wow, it's actually even better here, right? Like what I live is okay, but there's greener pastures in different parts. So yeah, it's definitely was an experience. But like one thing many of my friends, that come is like you do see a contrast, right? Like because if you look at Fifth Avenue, if you look at Park Avenue, where it starts to where it actually ends up in the city, it's always a kind of fascinates me, like this contrast that we have in New York. Yeah,
there is a pretty intense juxtaposition of like the extreme wealth and the extreme poverty. I don't know if New York is the worst. Yeah. It could be. I mean, there's definitely other places. San Francisco is another. I feel like anytime you have a metropolitan city, you just have these like two extremes. Was your time as a teenager, I guess, what shaped the ultimate decision to join the military? Because only 2 years in high school, that's a pretty expedited, track of, what do I want to do with my life? Should I go to college, etc.? Like, what's going through your mind?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I finished high school. I actually had to repeat the 12th grade one more time. I stayed 2 years in high school because my transcript from Ukraine didn't come on time. So the second year of 12th grade, I was just like kind of hanging out in cafeteria, you knew what to do. Whatever, exactly. So then I went to college. And again, the college choice, I didn't know anything about college process, the college choices. And now that I'm working with my 16-year-old daughter, it's like, I have a little bit of experience, but I went to college. I went to community college for 2 years because a lot of people that I was growing up with, that was easy acceptance. And I'm like, okay, it's not very hard to get in. Like, I'm going to try that. So I joined a close by community college in Westchester Community College. And I spent almost 2 years there getting my associate degree. And with a couple of classes left, I all of a sudden decided like I need to join the military. And in the Marines, when I joined, there's only 3 reasons you join the military. Yeah. You have problems in the family, you have problem with the law, or you have problem with your love life. Yeah. I was never in jail, and my family was good. Right? So it's always like, okay, so what happened? So long story short, when you're in your 20s, you kind of like, you think everything is like existential crisis.
Yeah.
So I'm like growing up with just my mom and my sister in like predominantly female household. And I'm like, I need to test myself. I need to see if I can do it.
Yeah.
So I walked into recruiter station.
Was it the one on Times Square?
No. I wish I didn't even know what Times Square was at that time, right? It was one in East Tremont in the Bronx, where like, a mile away from my house. I walked in and I'm like, you know what? If I'm gonna join the military, I may as well go for, the top force or like the top choice. And I knew like what Marines were at the time, but of course the dress blues and everything else was like.
I was gonna say, you were just too scared to join the army, and so you had to settle for the Marines, or.
Listen, I'm like, if I'm gonna join, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try Marines, and of course I took the SVAP, and my English part was not quite good, but my math and other skills, they're like, oh, okay, you're good, you have a decent score. Do you want to do this and this? And I'm like, no, I want to go to infantry.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, I mean, it's probably better choices, but it's like, like as you said, like certain images that you have about a country is like when I was watching some of the military movies, those machine gunners carrying the 50 cal on their shoulders, I'm like, I want to be like that.
Do you remember any specific movie? Like, are there any movies in particular that like stood out to you from your childhood?
I mean, it's the first American movie I ever seen was Commando. I mean, I don't know. How can you go bad with Arnold?
It was a done. Once you saw that movie, it was a done deal that you were joining.
That's it, right? Like, a guy in no shirt and a bulletproof vest, and with the grenades hanging off it. So like, yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's
how I want to be.
I feel like that movie there's a few movies out there that must have just done wonders for recruiting numbers.
Yeah, I mean, Commando, I think still probably like a top choice for me when it came to like blowing shit up. And the scene that I do remember when he was in the beginning, when he was looking, somebody was sneaking behind him, and I saw it in the reflection of the X, and I'm like, and he almost threw it, and I'm like, that's it, this guy.
And that was exactly how your military career turned out, correct?
Just like that.
Just like that.
I walked in.
There was not a single lie in that movie.
Especially the camouflage. That's exactly how we put the 3 stripes across the face.
Exactly.
That's definitely Commando style.
The amount of time we were on training rotations where we would actually do the camo paint, and the amount of commanders or platoon sergeants like, don't do it like the movies. You actually have to break up the lines on your face. It doesn't make any sense if you just do one. Like, it defeats the purpose. Yeah. And every single time somebody would try, just like be like, I want to look cool. It's like, but that's not the point.
Exactly. Yeah. No, we had a gunny who would like, if you saw something like that, he would smear all over your face with his bare hands. And,
oh my God.
You don't do it again.
Yeah. So Marines, you wanted to go infantry. Obviously the movie influences. What was your family thinking? It's funny, I grew up in an all women's household as well, and I wonder if that played some sort of factor into me being like, well, I'm around women all the time. I need to join the whatever the military to try to prove myself. But did they have any thoughts? Were you like, regardless of what they say, I'm joining, or was your mom freaking out like, no, don't join?
Yeah, my mom was going bananas because in Ukraine, actually, the service is mandatory, right? And even forget about what's going on right now. During peacetime, the service is mandatory. You usually do between 2 to 3 years. If you're a regular army, 2 years. Like fleet, Navy, you will do 3 years. And it was not a good time. When I say that, there was not a lot of benefit going to the Ukrainian or Russian military back then. Because simply this was like lost years. Yes, it would be tough, and you would be, hopefully you come in one piece, and there is no like crazy hazing going on, but like it was not very valuable time.
Right.
So she was like, dude, I took you out of Ukraine so that you don't have to serve in the military, and here you go voluntarily join, and not just join, but you join for 4 years. Well, like, what's your problem? Like, what's your deal? And I'm like, Mom, I need to do it for myself. I need to test it. I need to make sure that I'm capable of, putting tasks in front of me that I can't accomplish and then go above that.
Yeah. How long between when you started talking to a recruiter and actually like shipping off to basic training? Did you, so you graduate, like you completed your associate's degree, or was this towards the completion?
I was like one class away, like
Wow.
literally. So like I was supposed to have like one more class in the summer, and I'm like, screw this. I shipped
Was it
out.
just a really bad class that you didn't want to take? Like
I think so, probably. I'm like, you know what? I'd rather do like 4 years in the Marines. than, like,
linear
finish.
algebra. You're like, you know what? 4 years in the Marines is probably easier than this. Like, I'm not gonna.
Exactly. So I was going to take that summer class, and I'm like, you know what? They came back and said, look, there is this position that you wanted. They have it. Let's do. And I shipped out like literally Memorial Day weekend.
Oh, wow.
Like 1998. I shipped out and I went to MEPS, and from there it's like, okay, I didn't even finish my associate degree, and
Wow.
I went straight into boot camp.
I'm not going to let you get out of the opening the MRA. So as I ask this question, we'll crack these open. So I got tortillas.
I hope it's okay. I'm gonna use a.
Oh yeah, I actually brought one, but that's actually the second time somebody's brought their own. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I commute on the train every day.
Got to come.
Like in today's environment. Oh wow, they're like waterproofing. This is now.
Yep.
This is like you don't have to field trip anymore. It's kind of like all done for you.
Twice now, I've been disappointed that I've gotten incredibly expired candy within my MRE. It's probably fine. It's M&Ms, but I don't know if I'm willing to take that risk.
You guys are gonna soft M&Ms.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do we got here? Do we got just regular cheese spread?
So I assume this
lemon
is
lime. I'm saving that for later.
So this is the main meal, I assume, right?
Yep.
Oh.
Ooh, marble
chunky
pound cake.
peanut butter. That still exists.
That's usually a good one. Yep.
Yeah. What is this? Strawberry jam.
All right.
So do you guys do trading in between?
We can trade. Yeah, we can do whatever you want. So I've got marble.
Sugar cookies patriotic. This is.
Those are probably pretty good. Let's. We can also share too. We've done.
Yeah.
We do a mix of things where.
I'm definitely. What is this? Sterling Food mini loaf. Oh wow! It comes with bread now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. No mold.
Tabasco.
We're looking good.
Is there Tabasco? There's no Tabasco anymore? No way.
Some of them do. Some of them don't.
No way.
The most disappointing was the last episode. My Tabasco somehow evaporated within the bottle. I have no idea how that happened, but
What is this?
if you want some marble pound cake, this one usually is
Applesauce.
pretty good.
All right. Oh, you got beverage base powder. That's a Gatorade, huh? So I saw the last episode. I guess there's a new way of heating up the MREs, right? You gotta put it into the sleeve instead of like using your old cardboard box.
Yep, they've changed things up, which make it exciting. So do you want to go heated or unheated?
I'm definitely gonna. I have not heated an MREs for 20 plus years. I need to try and see if I still got
See if you overfill it. There's
yeah.
Besides it being incredibly dry, that is good pound cake.
The pound cake is good, huh?
So
where's jalapeno cheese? Does it still come around?
it does. Yeah. I was really disappointed that mine didn't. Can I borrow the knife actually here? This is.
You can absolutely borrow the knife. Here you go.
Nope, not working.
All right.
So, you said you wanted to go infantry. Is that what you ended up doing, or you said there was a special slot that had opened up, or?
Yeah. So I wanted to go to machine gun, 0331, but I ended up being 0351, which is assaultman.
Okay.
So small.
Yeah.
Or bazooka for you guys.
Yeah.
So that was the change, right? So they're like, oh, I guess you can actually almost have two MOSs. You can be an assaultman and you can play around with demolition and be playing with C4. So I'm like, okay, I will try that. So ended up taking that role. And the rest is, as they say, history.
This is going to be a very offbeat reference. Did you ever play Team Fortress 2? It's a
So
PC game.
you mentioned about video games. That's like one thing I've never got into. besides there was no video games, growing up, but like I have zero patience for video games. So
Okay.
the only game I've had on my phone right now is Tetris. And if I,
Okay. Because it was made by, I guess Russia.
yeah.
It would have been a better game if it was made by a Ukrainian.
It's my wife is from Russia. So as I joke around with anybody we meet, like we keep it civil at home, we do, but it is definitely, it was definitely raises some eyebrows every time we mention to people. But yeah, no video games. I have zero patience. The only time I ever played video game was Guitar Hero.
Got it. Are you a big musician?
I am not.
Oh, okay, just wanted to play.
Exactly. That's because I think it was easier to adapt than like a regular joystick. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try that.
There's a character in hopefully you don't take offense to that. I mean this nicely. There's a character in Team Fortress 2 who's the heavy gunner, and he has like a Russian or Balkan accent. He's like, "That's Svidanya." Like,
as normal it is, right?
Yeah, I'm like, so it's like Ukraine wanting to be a heavy gunner. I'm like, is that just a trope that like is actually true? Like.
Yeah, it's funny too. That or like a Grand Theft Auto. One of my buddies always sends us a guy that looks like a
Nico.
Yes, exactly. That looks with a beard and like always kills and steals stuff. So I'm like, yeah, that's me too. But it's funny in boot camp, like that's the reference that I got. Nobody called me by my name. Obviously the drill instructors, but it was always, hey, come here.
Oh God.
So I'm sure nowadays it probably with a little more sensitivity, people probably would
can't say that.
Exactly. Yeah, be canceled right away.
So you wanted to go this route. How was expectations versus reality in basic training? Like at any point, are you going, what did I get myself into? Or did you feel like you kind of knew the things that you were going to face, especially in like basic training or boot camp for the Marine Corps?
I had zero knowledge of what's going to transpire, what's going to take place. It was all very challenging, right? Like, I mean, first of all, being in South Carolina from May to August, I learned things like chiggers and, the heat rash and a slew of other things that like I didn't know exist, in New York. But in terms of training, it was pretty challenging. I think like physical challenging. I think the sleep deprivation, but I think the biggest thing as your previous guest, Mike, was like the whole shift of like you don't belong to yourself, right? Like they will tell you when to wake up, they will tell you what to eat, and they will tell you what to wear, how to march and how to shoot and swim. And that was the thing, like probably the biggest thing, like for any 20-year-old, especially civilian, that like you need to remove yourself as an individual and like become part of the unit and like understand like somebody will tell you what to do, and you're gonna have to do it, right? That I think that's probably was, and I got in trouble a lot, for moving around in formation or or on the line or like or like sometimes smiling and
God forbid you have an itch or what have you.
This one time I remember, oh my God, we had this very very tall dark green Marine who was our drill instructor, and drill instructor Fulton. And as we learned later, he actually used to be a cook, right? So
oh wow!
But this guy was probably like 6'3", 6'4", but 300 PFT, like running 15-minute 3 miles.
My God.
This guy was like, everybody was scared of him. Yeah. And we were doing drill for like a company drill one time, and there was like a major mosquito right in my face.
Yeah.
So as he like looked away, I sort of like winked and I tried to get out of my face. He came over and like, wow, what's going on, recruit? And I'm like, sir, this recruit has a mosquito. He's like, let me help you. And he just put his finger right in my eye, and I'm like, I will rather let the mosquito eat me next time than I see this
now
guy.
That I know what the alternative is, exactly. I'd rather have just let the mosquito eat me.
And I think the time in sandpit after that was definitely not worth it. So like next time, mosquito it is.
I feel like boot camp tough, right? I mean, it takes a toll on you. What was kind of the first year like in the Marine Corps? So you graduate. I'm guessing mom came by or family came by during graduation feeling pretty proud, or like, I told you, like, you regret this decision. Like,
the first year, I think it was definitely transformational, right? So besides losing probably 50 pounds in the heat of the summer in South Carolina, and like getting leaner and faster and stronger, but I think that getting that discipline, getting that experience of like doing things, doing challenging things, and being able to accomplish things I wasn't able to do before was pretty cool. But then obviously things change as you go from boot camp to SOI and then to the fleet, where like, okay, you might be a senior guy in SOI, and like now you know what you're doing in the field, but then you get to the fleet and like you are completely green, and you have the real Marines now in charge of you, telling you what to do. It's like,
this ain't boot camp anymore.
Exactly right. Like this is like going from like training to an actual actual fleet. So it was quite good, and I think it shapes you like how it will go forward. So we arrived, and our senior guys made sure that we remember who they were 20 years later.
It's funny, I've caught up with one of my team leaders not too long ago. I tried whatever. Also, these are Cheez-Its, so pretty good as well.
There was a Patriot cookies, right? Where, they were.
Was it? Or is it that, or?
Yeah, I think it might be this.
I remember him. We were chatting, and he had said something along the lines of, I was kind of a jerk to you. And I'm like, nah, it's like fine. Like, you actually taught me a lot of different things, like in a very harsh and difficult way, but I definitely learned it of how to apply myself, always striving to, learn a little bit more. And he's like, yeah, but I was like kind of a dick and like da-da-da. And he's like, but I was also like 20 years old. And I think that was the biggest shock to me, was like, while you're in it, a sergeant's a sergeant, right? When you're a private. And it wasn't until much later in life that I contextualized. I'm like, oh, that sergeant was probably 20 years old, like 10 years, 11 years younger than I am now, which is insane to me. And then when you're 18 and you're a private, like, this person must know all the, you know what I mean? And just reflecting back, it's just incredible to me just how that functions, of it's 18-year-olds being led by some 20-year-olds, being led by some maybe 26-year-olds, being led by some 30-year-olds.
Yeah. I mean, I think you nailed it, right? It's like when you arrive as a private PFC into the fleet, and you have this like lance corporals, and sergeant. Oh my God. You think like these are the veterans that spent like 30 years in the Corps. And then you realize they're only like maybe same age as you are. In my case, I was a little older than most of the recruits or junior people. But in reality, they're only like 2 years more in the fleet than you. Well, unless they got busted down to, from sergeant to lance corporal, that's a different story. So it's like you have this crazy admiration to people like thinking like, oh my God, these guys, wealth of knowledge, they know everything that's going on. And like, meanwhile, like some of them are still 20 years old and can't even buy a beer yet. So, but I think like everything in retrospect, it becomes like, you get that feeling that like, you know what? Yes, they're only maybe 2 years younger than you, or older than you, but they actually do have the 2 years in the fleet or 2 years experience in the military, going through deployment, going through things. It actually does make them a lot more knowledgeable, and a lot more what's the word that I'm looking for? Like
experience,
exactly. A lot more experience and trustworthy than myself. So then you're like, you know what? I will listen to you. I will respect you. But
it is interesting. I feel like there must be a study out there somewhere of like how the military must expedite like experience, right? Because I do think, maybe I think this, maybe I don't. This is a pretty loose thought here, that 1 year in the Army or 1 year in the military, it probably imposes a lot more experience than, say, 1 year in a corporate world. And I don't know if that's just the training, the rigor, the fact that it's almost 24/7, or you're just so, seeped into it. But to that point of, they might be 20 years old and pretty young, but they have done a few things that, there is that like wealth of knowledge that they've been able to build over a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah, I think like the whole, and most of the corporation actually, I mean, if you look at it, most of the corporation actually built after military, right?
Yeah.
Like mostly, like if you look at large companies, they usually have 3 divisions, and then there is usually like a very clear hierarchy. So I do think there is a lot of value in how it's structured, but also like the training aspect of it, it is very condensed. It is done under a very particular rigor on purpose, right? It is done to prepare you to being able to move and think very quickly. So yeah, the 2 years, if you think about it, like if you look at the entire, and the entire contract of being 4 years, 2 years, that's like 50% of your time. That's like if you work for 20 years in the corporate world and you already work for 10 years, like you will be a wealth of knowledge for people coming in like out of high school and out of college. So where
was your first duty station?
I knew you were probably going to ask and probably make fun of me there. So it's kind of a little funny. My first duty choice was Camp Pendleton.
Okay.
So I'm graduating from SOI, and like 2 days before, they're like, okay, you guys got Camp Pendleton, congrats. Then a day before, like, sorry, you've been changed to 29 Palms. I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, that's like 3 years in a desert. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
And then like the day before graduation, they're like, no, there's one more change. You guys going to Hawaii. So I'm like, yes, I think I've lucked out. Some gods listened to me. I didn't want to be in the desert. So I was in Kaneohe Bay, K-Bay for 3.5 years.
That's awesome. That is very, very nice. I wonder if they knew and they're like, we can't give them this much joy this early on, so we're going to have to string them along. I remember, I forget his name, but it was in AIT, and the last week, I think, they tell you your duty station. So we're a class of, maybe 20 people, and this one guy gets, field artillery in the Army is... Oklahoma, Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which is, I don't know if you've ever been, no offense to anybody watching who's from Oklahoma, not a lot going on in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. The grass would just catch on fire in the summertime, and so we'd have to stop doing like live training because they're like, field caught on fire. But so he got stationed there for his first duty station after spending basic training in AIT there. And then myself and I think 2 others got Italy. And I was only slightly fearful of my life those last few days because this guy was not happy that he got Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and then a couple other people get Italy as the alternative.
It's funny. Yeah, no, it's Oklahoma definitely would be, I think, painful. It's funny you ask. I do know only like 2 people from Oklahoma. One of them actually was a junior guy that was part of our unit. Earl Plumley, who's actually a Medal of Honor here, recipient. Yeah, so actually it was one of my junior guys in Marines. He left. He went to the Army, Green Beret. So that was
he got his head on straight. Decided,
exactly, but he was he was in Force Recon before.
Okay.
Then Green Beret, and that was the first person I met from Oklahoma. I didn't know anybody from Oklahoma growing up in the Bronx. And then when I went to work for my second job after college, there was another guy that I recruited was from Oklahoma, and I'm like,
I think you met the 2 people from Oklahoma. I think that's the entire population.
Exactly.
So you get stationed in Hawaii. So you did actually, the Marine Corps lived up to their promise of you got to see the world. You got to hang out in a pretty cool spot. How was the rest of your time in the Marines? And you did 4 years total?
Yeah, I did 4 years total. It was, I think, like with any job, right? There are positive and negative, but obviously it was really great experience. I made a lot a lot of friends that I'm still very close with, but also it kind of shaped me. Not kind of, I think it pretty shaped me about the way I am today in many respects, good and bad, I guess. But I think overall it was a positive experience. It gave me things that I was looking for. It gave me qualities, and it gave me things that I was looking for.
Was there anything in particular? And if you don't mind me asking, again, I'm not trying to purposely date you here. What years were you in?
Yeah, so I was in 98 through 2002.
2000. Okay. Wow. So then you have kind of a in the 90s, right? There's maybe Somalia at that time, but then obviously 2001. I guess having lived in New York, now being in the military, how did that impact you while serving?
I mean, it was actually, like everybody in New York is like, what did you do on like 9/11, right? Like that's the question people say. So actually like 9/11 or like September 11th, actually my sister's birthday, I was in Okinawa station in Okinawa, so like 13 hours ahead. So it was probably like 8-9 p.m. Okinawa time, so it was like 7 a.m. New York time. Sorry, the other way around. So like 8 a.m. New York time. So I called my sister, wish her happy birthday and everything. And I went to sleep, and my roommate was on duty that night. Yeah. And he's a big prankster. And so I went to sleep, and then this guy comes banging the door. He's like, dude, come downstairs. Wow, look at the TV. He's like, the Twin Towers got hit. I'm like, dude, I'm going to sleep. If you're more than duty, go find somebody else. I'm not sitting.
It's a weird joke.
Right. Like I'm not sitting while I need to sleep with you because you cannot watch TV or because he's like, no, seriously, come downstairs. I'm like, dude, I'm telling you, if I come downstairs and you're messing with me, you're gonna get it. He's like, no, I'm joking. I go downstairs, and like at this time, the first tower is hit, and we're watching it, and as we watching TV. As you imagine, like AFS or whatever, like the Armed Forces Network, the second tower gets hit, and I'm like, oh shit! And it was actually like September, so it was middle of September. It was a typhoon season in Okinawa, so we actually were locked in the barracks already because it was pretty bad. So like 2 hours later, our CO came. He said, okay, boys, pack your bags. I don't know what's going to happen, but something will happen, right? So it was probably pretty incredible to like kind of witness. So obviously the base was locked down and full alert. It was the first time I was walking around with live rounds in my, with my M16 patrolling the base. And from there, we were just... This was September, yeah. From there, I can't remember exactly when our deployment finished, but from there on, we were in full readiness to be anywhere.
It's incredible how sometimes when you're in the military, it can be the most boring thing in the world, or like everything rolls at a snail's pace. But then there can be moments within it where then suddenly everything happens and you realize like how efficient the military can be, or just like how prepared it can be when something does happen, and like that mentality shift of like everything's good to like suddenly like everyone's on their P's and Q's and like ready to go. Yeah, no,
it was crazy. Like overnight we had a formation in the morning. They actually, because we were locked down, we couldn't even like go outside for a full formation. So we had our CO come into the barracks. They brought in a bunch of MREs. They said like, look, go pack your bags. We don't know what's going to happen, but we are done. And then we started to like full patrol 24/7 on Camp Hansen in Okinawa. And like I was pretty scared walking around, even though like, we're in Okinawa and you only get like a couple of local drunk guys who are upset and, yell and throw things over the fence. But you knew like this is just a matter of time. It's not like if, it's when. And so I ended up returning back to K-Bay. And I was supposed to get discharged May 25th, 2002. But I had like 60 days of leave saved up. So I went on terminal leave around March 26, 2002. And my first sergeant really wanted me to re-enlist. He's like, look, I can get you into Intel. I can do this and this. I'm like, I was pretty set on like leaving because I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to finish my degree and not continue on, because my thinking was, if I'm gonna stay one more enlistment and do 8 years, you may as well do 20, right? Because you kind of like in that spot, like I'm gonna be a 20-year-old guy coming out of military. My options will be either go to law enforcement or something like that with the infantry, or I can just come out as 24-year-old, go back, finish my undergraduate, and then do whatever I need to do. So I chose not to. But when I got home, 5 days later, I learned that there was a stop loss on April 1st.
Oh my!
And I guess, luckily for me, I was not deployed. I don't know if it's lucky or unlucky. It's a tough feeling, because a lot of my guys did get deployed, and it was a circumstance that kind of still with me a lot today. Thinking like, what if I did not go on terminal leave, or if I re-enlisted, where would I have been?
Yeah, it's I find myself playing that game a lot too. Like, well, what if this scenario? What if I had extended in Italy versus PCSing to Fort Campbell, And I mean, sometimes it's interesting to play through those scenarios of like, where would I be? And then sometimes I realize I'm like, oh, I'm just like torturing myself on like the what ifs, and the benefit of it usually is very rarely there. And so was there any particular like impetus within the military of saying like what was, when did you realize you had that mind shift of like, I'm ready to go to school again?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was always ready, right? Like I was always ready, and I always wanted to go to school. I was first in my family to go to college because, like in Ukraine, my mom and everything growing up, it was not an option, or it was a very difficult option. But I always wanted to go to college, and I knew, as much as I love military, right, there is that other side of me, such as the entrepreneurial or whatever it is, where like I love my brotherhoods. I love a lot of military has to offer, but it's still I'm limited to what military tells me I can do, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, I was like, look, I will always cherish this time. I will always be proud to be a Marine, but I want to go and pursue other things.
You said something before where I think I was very much in the same mindset, and we'll start cracking open these entrees or the applesauce.
No. I will save it for later. No, definitely.
Those tend to be pretty good, like just as regular snacks. But you had mentioned, well, if I'm gonna do 8, I might as well do 20. I think that was my stance too, of like, I'm not sure what I want out of life, but I do know that if I sign this re-enlistment, I'm not really locking myself down for 4 years. Like there's a chance I'm locking myself down for 20. And that just, for whatever reason, didn't quite sit right for me. And I was like, nah, I think there's something else on the other side that I want to explore. Not that I want to sit on this a little bit, but it is just, I guess, a coincidence or interesting. You had to mention, or we talked about 9/11, and when I was with the 173rd, it was when Crimea happened, and that was also a shift. So we had come back from deployment, and being stationed in Italy, the closest to Russia, it went from like, all right, what are we gonna do next? Is it gonna be another deployment? We had done on our training rotations to Germany sometimes the mock, it's the Russians, or it's whatever, the enemy, but it's not a coin operation. And then suddenly Crimea happens, and we're like, oh, we're jumping into potentially Lithuania and Estonia. We're going here. Everyone have their bags ready to go. And again, it's just whenever there's an event, you can always quickly tell that shift in the military. But I want to get to your transition out. How were you planning that? Did you know what you wanted to study or to graduate in? How are you figuring out which schools to go to and just like how to be a civilian again?
Yeah, no, I didn't know. I still, I was in the military. My mentality shifted from being in the military. Kind of a lot of things were figured out for me. So like now I have to get out. I have to readjust back to the civilian world, and a lot of my friends were already in college, so I had some ideas or some thoughts about what college life looks like. But I was studying business before, and I'm like, look, I'm gonna go back to school for business.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly like what side of business, right?
Yeah.
So I enjoy working with numbers. I enjoy business side. So I'm like, I'm gonna do finance because I think that there's also like you can apply it in many different ways. So back to New York again. The college selection process as it is right now, where my daughter has a spreadsheet with Target and Safe and Reach, and that concept didn't exist, and also like nobody in my family has gone to college that could kind of guide me. The internet was just coming up, and so I kind of did the same thing. I'm like, what colleges around me in New York that will accept? So I applied to a couple. Pace University is the one that I chose to do the undergraduate degree. And it was actually closed because I still lived in the Bronx. It was in Westchester County, so it was like it's convenient.
Yep.
It's a decent school, so I'm just gonna do that. Again, it was kind of like I will do it and I will figure it out. Right? It's like there was not much thought or planning went into that, and it ended up being okay. It's actually ended up being fine. Ended up graduating with decent grades and was off to find my first job.
I feel like that's the Marine mentality, right? It's like we're surrounded on all sides. Good. like we'll figure it out. Did you feel like the military prepared you for college, or did it feel like you had to break a lot of those mentalities or like have a mentality shift getting into college?
No, I think it definitely helped me. It also helped me because I had a lot of fun in my 4 years in Marines. Yeah. So going to school,
Hawaii, Okinawa, you're
exactly Korea, Japan, Okinawa, Korea, Japan, Hawaii. So I had my fair share of fun. So while the 18-year-old kids that go back to college, it's like, okay, it's the first time away from home. Yep. I'm gonna party my first year. I'm gonna have bad grades, and then mom and daddy will end up paying, one more year of tuition. I'll be okay. I already had that out of my system. So the experience actually was like, hey, I'm going to go in with the very sole purpose of finish as fast as I can my 4 years. I went in, I didn't cut any classes, and I'm like, I want to get it done as quickly as possible so I can move on and go become a full-time civilian with a job and my own place to live.
Oh, this looks so bad.
Oh man.
I'm gonna see if I can even get this on camera.
But it's all protein, like this is.
It doesn't even look cooked. Tell me that.
No, that definitely. I don't know. Holden, I would not try it. I'm telling you, I will not judge you. You should take another MRE.
It literally looks straight up raw. I mean, the fact that it's kind of.
But it smells like tuna though. It's not even smelling like chicken.
Yeah, I mean.
You know what they say, just put a little extra Tabasco, right? There's more Tabasco, right? And
exactly. I mean,
are you going to give it a try? Come on.
I got to give it a try. There's no way. I mean, it's like breaking apart. So I feel like only cooked chicken does that. It is white meat. I mean, listen.
It looked, oh, wow. He's going to be making burritos too.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
This is the only palatable way I think I can convince myself to.
Let's see. A beef goulash.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to go to a Ukrainian village after this to compare it
to get some real
the real beef goulash. Yes.
Out of curiosity, just because I'm a big food guy, what is when you think of Ukrainian cuisine? Like, what's the go-to dish?
So the traditional is it's vareniki. Okay. Vareniki is kind of like dumplings, right? So like Ukrainians, it's usually with the most traditional one with potatoes. And sometimes with mushrooms and onions. So it's like think about dumplings.
Yep.
But like you put it with like sour cream and butter.
Yep.
So it's really good.
This could potentially start a fight, so I'm going to be very careful here.
Yeah.
Is it similar to like a pierogi?
It is just like, so pierogi.
Okay.
Yeah. So vareniki and pierogi is like Polish people call it pierogis.
Okay.
And but again,
is there a rivalry between, like, if you called one pierogi versus the other, they're like, no, not a pierogi.
Yeah. So it's actually, Ukrainians don't call it pierogi, they call it vareniki.
Got it.
But because, you know, Poland and Ukraine, the border on the western part, so there was a lot of, over time, you know, with territory changes and everything else, a lot of cuisine and a lot of things were mixed. So it's very similar. Like it's the exact same dish.
Yeah.
The exact same. Polish people will say it's, you know, we invented pierogi, and then.
But obviously it was the Ukrainians,
right? It's like who invented pasta, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like, or.
I have that take of every country has, like, everyone shares the same dish. It's just different variations of the same thing. Like 100%. Everyone has a dumpling. Everyone has some variation of the same dish. It's like somewhat different. And sometimes like the flavor profile is a little different. Like in China, you have xiaolongbao, which is our soup dumplings. But then in Georgia, the country, they have khinkali. See,
of course.
It's just a giant xiaolongbao. Like they're the same thing.
Yeah. No, it's funny you mentioned, because like we were in the summertime, we were in Portugal, and we were doing a walking tour, and we arrived to the place where it used to be the customs, where back in the day when the ships would come into Lisbon, anybody who brings any food, any stuff for sale, they would go through customs to clear, to make sure that they're able to sell, or any vessels. So, and then there's, I forget the name of the famous artist. They built a house, and they gave him a house in that area. And the person said, like, look, imagine close your eyes and stand in this place where, you know, people would try lemons for the first time, or people would try like bay leaf, because things were coming in from the New World, from America for the first time, and this is what they would come through in this plaza, and people would be like, what is this, right? They would see that for the first time. But meanwhile, you know, like later, you know, 200, 300 years later, things were adapted. And now like it became a Portuguese dish.
I think one of the best is in Ireland, right? Like the joke, like everyone in Ireland eats potatoes, yet potatoes are South American. So for a large portion of time or history, the Irish didn't have potatoes. It was like in the grand scheme of things, a relatively recent thing, and it becomes so adapted and so ubiquitous to the area that, you know, they all have it.
Exactly. It's funny you brought this up. So for Jewish New Year, you eat brisket. Yep. Right. And then Irish people eat corned beef, which is the exact same thing. And the reason being, I don't know if you know the history behind it, is so traditionally Jews and Irish people lived in the poorest part of New York City. And the part that you use for brisket is the cheapest part of cow, because that's why you cook for 6 to 8 hours.
Not anymore, but
for 6 to 8 hours to get it tender. And they were using the same recipe next to each other. They just call it different, but it's the exact same thing. And they were using it for the exact same reason, because they could not afford like a more expensive part of beef.
Yeah. My biggest gripe now is some of those cuts have gone so expensive. Like skirt steak for the longest time was the butcher's cut. Nobody would eat it. Now suddenly it's the hip trendy thing. And I'm like, no, we need some cheap cuts here. Leave the cheap cuts. I'm
going to dive in. This is.
I mean, we got to get a 1-bite score here on the goulash.
On the goulash. I wish I had some hot sauce, but if it's not, it's all good.
I'm gonna start bringing some just in case they're not in the packets anymore, because on multiple occasions people have been very disappointed about that.
I will not be disappointed. Listen, it's a hot meal, so I'm gonna go for it. Let's see.
And as you go for that bite, I will say, not bad. It was actually relatively good with the mayonnaise and all that. It's very, very bland but decent.
Yeah, it's actually. If I was back in the military, it would probably be one of my favorite one.
The goulash?
I would add some rice. I would add some like scalloped potatoes, and I would trade it. And I am not disappointed. I have to say, I will finish this dish.
Yeah, usually the stew type dishes end up being pretty good. Like you made a sandwich with the peanut butter and jelly. Yeah. Sometimes I just like crumble the bread and throw it in, so it just like soaks up everything, and then you can just wolf down the entire thing. Oh
yeah, absolutely. It's usually like crackers. I would just put crackers and cheese into everything. Because you don't have the luxury of sit down and eat, 3-course meal. You gotta eat it all at once, and that's it.
Exactly. So going back, nope, that was very close to the microphone. Going back, college, you graduate, business finance. I mean, it sounds like you literally are just figuring this out along the way. So spoiler, you're now at Samsung, doing very well for yourself. But then, how do you go from enlisted Marine, knowing nothing, first generation college kid, to there, right? Because you had to have done something right.
Yeah, right. I think like figuring out was a big part of it, but I knew kind of what I was gravitating towards. Like I wanted to be in business. So again, right, I didn't know much at that time. The information flow was, mostly newspapers, right? You couldn't really go on TikTok or other social media platform to figure out things, or on X. I will say that one of my good close friends that I went to high school with, and who still lives in New York City, he was already in finance, and I think he influenced a lot of my decisions because he's done quite well for himself, and a lot of like the early decision around school and college, I would go to him because it was one of my very close friends, but also somebody I could trust, but also somebody who knew he's already been working in a couple of investment banks, and therefore like having that person to go to, because again, right, like my mom was working her butt off in regular blue collar jobs, being a home attendant. I couldn't really go to her and ask her for career advice and like where to go, a hedge fund or investment bank. I had to rely on other people, and so this buddy of mine, he was instrumental in the early decisions that I was making and telling me how the inside world works and how all the stuff works in the financial world, and tell me to follow this certain things and become more knowledgeable, and I have to thank him for that. And my first job, I think I sort of also got lucky, right? I think I'm kind of always drawn parallel, like how military kind of helped me along the way, or being in the military. My first job out of college was actually in a hedge fund, right? Like,
wow. So how do you find that?
First, it was completely applying through like my PACE, I forget what it's called, the co-op education, whatever platform they had, like all the open recruiters. And again, so this was a small hedge fund, but already like managing like $2 billion under management, based in Greenwich. But I think the reason I was picked for the role, one of the 5 partners was a former Army guy, an enlisted guy, but for that, and I think he saw the value that the military people bring, and especially not going to Naval Academy or like other prestigious academies and being an enlisted person. I think it gave me that opening and let me go and join my first job, because the first job is always the hardest one, right? Once you crack into the first job, you will use your network, your experience, but getting the first job, and especially around 2004 when I graduated, right? You had your 2001 .com crash and all other stuff. It was important for me to get a good job. But at that time, I wouldn't go to any jobs, right? And prior to landing to this, I flopped maybe 100 other resumes, 100 other interviews that I've done, but I got lucky.
I don't think it's luck. I mean, yes, to some extent. I'm not going to say that luck never plays a role, and I do believe in like the intersection of luck and hard work. But it's so funny because I mean, you mentioned like, well, all I did was like go to the like career center and like look for stuff and apply. The amount of people I meet who are just like, oh, I didn't even go like to the career center, or like, oh, I didn't apply this way. Like I'm just like waiting for something. It's like, just try, you know what I mean? Like nothing's going to fall in your, like that level of luck.
Yeah.
Almost never happens. And if it does, you just straight up got lucky. But I've noticed so many times where, I mean, to be fair too, like I made that mistake my first year at Stanford where I just didn't realize that hedge funds and investment banking start their recruiting cycle super, super early in the year. I don't know what it was like in 2004, but then by the time I realized I had to apply, I just was like, oh, I'm way behind on the curve. And one thing I could have done is probably just ask questions, gone to the recruiting, the career center maybe like earlier on in the school year, and be like, when should I apply and etc. But I was kind of just like, oh, well, now I'm at Stanford, something will probably happen. And it was a hard learning lesson that year.
Yeah, no, I mean, like it was definitely, I was jumping at any other opportunity, any jobs or anything that was open. Because again, right, like I'm still only now 8 years in the country, and don't really have experience with the corporate world. Mm-hmm. So I had to use whatever means there were. And at that time, again, right, a lot of things were different, right? You at some places you actually had to bring a physical resume to some places, right, mail it. But yeah, I think as I was talking to somebody today, like what's the downside if you don't apply? You just you will be 100% loss, right? Like if you do apply, you get rejected. Okay, that there is no loss, right? It's an opportunity cost. That's it.
Yeah, you had mentioned one of the partners was an Army guy, and I feel like sometimes you are like, oh well, like you just got in because like you were also in the service, and I don't think that's true. I think why service members tend to hire other service members, or there's now a shift even with regular civilians realizing like maybe this person's non-traditional, but the military provides the leadership, the soft skills. They know that you're going to have the grit and dedication. Not everybody. Some not great people in the military do,
right?
But right,
10%,
with anything, right? But I've noticed that too. Is like it's just like those baselines where you're like, well, more likely than not, don't need to worry about these skill sets. And the amount of people again that like just don't try to leverage that network of like who in the company might be somewhat similar to me, whether that be the same school or the same branch or in the military or what have you, and be like, let's try to make that connection on that level so that it's a little easier.
Yeah, I think like any affinity that you can use, whatever it is, right? It should be, you should try to use it. And I think you should also, besides having your own skills, but I think like there's always that one connection, that one conversation that can spark an opportunity. Yeah. And you know what what the angle is, and whether it's somebody like for you, right? You might be looking for somebody who is also from Sweden because you might. I've
literally done that, like where I'm like, oh, like you're Swedish, and then you can jump into that.
Exactly. I sometimes when I was looking for roles, I would look for people. If I don't know somebody in the company, I would look for people that I know would be like from Russia or Ukraine that I can probably connect and then have a cold conversation. The chance of somebody accepting my LinkedIn, invitation is probably a higher chance or we might have somebody in mutual connection. So I think like, not using the military angle, right? Like of trying to land the first job or trying to get into school, I think it would be silly, right? That you spend 4 years or 8 years or 20 years of your life. And there's going to be a lot of people either from the same boat or who will understand the value that you bring.
I've gone so far as during interviews, I love watches and being like, oh, that's a nice watch. I did it and like use that as a jumping off. Or if I see they maybe have a picture of a sailboat, like, oh, do you sail? Use everything. Like as long as you can build that human connection in their interview, and it could be as trite could be of, I love your watch, like tell me about it. But then you like build that connection. So you do the hedge fund. Was that an internship or your first job?
No, it was my first year. I think like 2 years. I spent 2 years. We were building out like an operations department because there was just 5 partners and a couple of analysts, and there was nothing for like finance, accounting, back office type of operations. So myself and actually another person from my college, from my group, we were hired in the same day. So we spent like 2 or 3 years each at that hedge fund. And then, and after that, I knew like that my role probably is, somewhat somewhat limited from where I was going or what I wanted to do. It was a cold, I don't know if it was called through a headhunter. I ended up being at Morgan Stanley in the commodities trading department.
Yeah.
And spent like close to 9 years there. That was probably the longest tenure of any other employments.
I'm not good at math, but 2004, 2 years there. You're 2006. You joined Morgan Stanley, do 9 years. You're crossing the chasm of 2008. Obviously, you made it through it fine, but was that a rocky time for you?
Yeah, I mean, similar to military, like we have, like from every job, I kind of have like a core of friends of people that you pick up along the way, and then you part ways and you still keep in touch. We still talk about being 2008 and the company. I mean, a lot of banks went bankrupt, right? So seeing when Barclays sign went up and Lehman sign went down, being in Midtown and seeing Bear Stearns, going out of business and many other banks, it was pretty scary. I mean, Morgan Stanley almost came to a brink, and literally within 1 day to closing. During that time, I was in a group that like had to provide liquidity every single day. So we'd come into 6 a.m. We would look at all of our receivables, all of our payables, figure out like who we need to have a margin call with, check every wire that came in to make sure that we can cover our expenses and we can, we can stay afloat and report it all the way to CFO of the company. And it was that kind of daily basis, probably for 6 to like 8 months until we kind of came out of the other end of this. But it was pretty nerve-wracking to
trial by fire, I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, you see, like at that time, I didn't have any equity in the company, but I saw people that were senior, and like when their stock went from like 60 down to like $6, and people's life savings, people that were supposed to retire, people that were leaving, people that getting laid off. It was probably like one of like the most nerve-wracking things to live through, but it also gives you that agility, and it gives you that ability to say, hey, if I was able to manage this, my next crisis that I'm going to work on, whether in life or work, we can manage that as well. It's funny you bring this up because when I was in a hedge fund, one of the partners, his always questions, like when he was hiring traders, is like, so what's the most you ever lost in any of your portfolio? And everybody wants to be a superstar. Like, no, I've never lost any money. And he would never hire anybody who never experienced losses because it's very easy and very cool to be the superstar trader, making $100 million a year. But if you aren't able to work under stress and being able to sustain that pressure for a long time, then you don't know how you're going to act under pressure. Same as in combat, right? Like it's cool to be like this, sharpshooter or an expert on the range, but you don't know when you're going to be like when there's fire coming back.
Yeah, it's not always in the frame of, failure, right? But like you need those stressors, right? Like you need to be able to prove yourself, whether that is losing a whole bunch of money in the market or literal trial by fire or just, those tough moments, as kind of some of them do suck while you're going through it. At least you are then prepared for the next one. And sometimes the next one's easier. Sometimes it's even harder, but at least it's like that repetition of the metaphor of getting punched in the face. Like it still hurts, but at least you know what the feeling of getting punched in the face, so you can face it a little bit better next time.
Yeah, it's how you're going to rebound from negative experience, right? It's because if everything is peachy and unicorns and rainbows, right? Everybody's enjoying and singing Kumbaya and high five, and it's great. Yeah. But the minute there's somebody's punching you in the face and you can't get up and continue on, then I think it will kind of show you what kind of personality you are. Being
now a second-time founder, I found that it doesn't necessarily get easier. Like there's still tough things. It's just that I can handle the tough things a little bit more. And so usually when I talk with my co-founder, I just go like, he's like, oh, how you doing? I'm like, well, it still sucks. Still not fun. Not really enjoying it. But like I know we'll get through it. And I think that is the thing when you're going through something the first time, and please eat if you're hungry. When you're going through the first time, you sometimes do think like, I don't know, am I gonna actually get through this? And then once you do, you're like, oh, okay. retroactively not, or retrospectively not so bad. We are coming up at time. I want to get to present day though. You're at Samsung now. How do you make that leap from Morgan Stanley commodities trading, surviving 2008 to now Samsung?
Yeah. So one of my friends that I was working at Morgan Stanley with, he left and he went to join a company called Mastercard. We were working together, and I was looking for a new. It was actually, speaking of, you mentioned Crimea, right? One of the big things that after 2008, there was also 2014, right? And there was a Dodd-Frank and everything else that came out of 2008. So my bank had to sell off our assets, and we made a deal, struck a deal for my department to be acquired by Rosneft, which is like a Russian oil company, right? Which was actually would have been a great experience for us. But as soon as we struck a deal, 2014 took place. And as I was saying before, lucky sometimes, not lucky sometimes, you kind of look in retrospect and you look back and you're like, wow, that was probably a good move. It was actually when 2014 took place, and for any foreign company to acquire any U.S. assets, especially oil assets or any strategic assets, it has to be approved in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there is no way this will happen, right? And they were working through it, got approved in other jurisdictions around the world, but I'm like, there's no way. And if this deal falls through and another company buys this, like a U.S. company, they will just chop us up and sell in assets, and then just they will fire everybody. And so I left that. I went to a different company, and I was working commodity, but in a different company. And then when I was ready to kind of leave commodity, because at that time all the companies moved into Houston, and if you want to stay in oil, you need to move to Texas. I wasn't prepared to leave New York, and for family reasons and others. I'm like, I need to find something else. So a buddy of mine that I was working with at Mastercard, at Morgan Stanley, he was already working at Mastercard, and I saw a role that he posted. I'm like, payments. I'm like, I know about credit cards, nothing, right? Yeah. I know I have a credit card. I know how to use it.
Yeah. It's a piece of plastic.
Exactly, right? Like at that time, it was plastic, right? And I'm like, okay, I mean, it's within treasury, it's finance, I understand numbers, I can figure it out. So I went in for the first role. It was actually quite an interesting role, and I didn't get it. And one of the guys who was interviewing was also from an Eastern European Republic. We struck conversation, and he's like, look, there's going to be another role, and when there is, you should apply for that role. And I listened to his advice and applied for the role. Ended up spending 4 years at Mastercard and learning payments, right? And then once I got into it, I realized it was actually very close to what commodities were, right? It's an exchange of payment for something, for durable goods or for whatever case. And actually, the way that payments work is very similar to commodity. The way it travels, the way the sanctions work, and everything that commodity represents, actually payments represent. And in retrospect, actually, most of the banks that trade commodity, the currency trading is also in the same division because it's very, very similar from risk perspective and from product perspective. So it was an excellent exposure to the new business, but applying the skills and the fundamentals that I learned from commodities and the risks. And I spent 4 years in a couple of different roles. And then I joined another payment company, Afterpay, and spent about 2.5 years building out an account management team, and became part of Square as part of the acquisition. And then I joined Samsung.
Man, it sounds like the lesson is be Eastern European or in the military, because you're going to get all the connections you need to be successful.
In commodities, for sure, being in from Europe is definitely works, and from US as well. But I think payments is same as commodity. I think it's very international space, and because something that like you use for everyday life, right? Like,
I'm going to ask you two incredibly loaded questions with a very limited amount of time to answer them. What does the future hold for you, and are you happy?
I'm going to start with the second one.
Okay.
I'm very happy, right? I'm happy. I have a very beautiful family. I have 3 kids, an amazing wife, an amazing family. We're fortunate. We're doing well. We're healthy. And I think looking at that and looking back at the things that I was looking before to be happy, I am realizing that I am happy, right? Because before I think maybe I was not focused on the right things or focused on different things to find happiness. So that's what future holds for me. I think like as you get older, you start to look for things a different lens, a different perspective. So I want to continue on to do things that have impact, right? So whether it's through veterans, whether it's through my alumni network, through like other people being able to give back and being able to like be resourceful and helpful is kind of like what I want to do in the future. And whether it's through work or side gig,
there's so many questions I want to ask you as follow-ups, but we got to wrap it there. So we'll have to have you on for episode 2 or part 2 of it. Dmitry, thank you so much. Around the, I know it's always off. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to finish this in a corner while you're wrapping up. I will take my knife.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I will need it for the traveling home.